Welcome to The Sit Down. I am Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. The Sit Down is the latest addition to our Raging Chicken Radio podcast. On The Sit Down, we talk to activists, public intellectuals, investigative journalists, and rabble-rousers of all sorts to deepen our discussions, prepare us for the struggles ahead. Raging Chicken Radio is a project of Raging Chicken Press. Check out all our citizen journalism at ragingchickenpress.org. You can subscribe to Raging Chicken Radio on Podbean, on Stitcher, Google Play Music, and iTunes. Subscribing to Raging Chicken Radio is one of the easiest things that you can do to help support this podcast and all the work that we're doing. And while you're there, make sure you share it out and you leave us a comment to let us know that you're listening. And if you want to help build a progressive activist media network for PA and beyond, you can become a member for Raging Chicken Networks for as little as $2 a month. $2, folks. Come on. That is less than the cost of a beer or a cup of coffee per month. Just go to ragingchickenpress.org and click Become a Member under the Support and Membership tab. Or if you're listening on Podbean, just click the Become a Patron button right at the top and you'll be on your way. Be sure to check out all the thank you gifts for each membership level while you're there. T-shirts, stickers, come on the show. We got a bunch of stuff there for you. So today on The Sit Down, we're talking to Karen Feridun, the founder of Berks Gas Truth. Karen is the founder of Burkes Gas Truth, a Kutztown, PA-based grassroots community organization of over 600 concerned citizens fighting to stop unconventional natural gas drilling in PA and across the country. And today we'll be talking about a critique of Obama's Clean Power Plan by the coalition, Pennsylvanians Against Fracking, of which Berks Gas Truth is a member. And we'll look ahead for the March of Clean Energy Revolution on July 24th in Philadelphia. And that's the eve of the Democratic Convention. And I think we're also going to squeeze a little John Quigley into the discussion today, since Karen has got a lot of background on that. So, Karen, welcome to The Sit Down.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I mean, I talk Karen up any chance I get. I mean, she's really my go-to person on fracking and, kind of just non-stop energy that doesn't quit, kind of activism coming out of good old Kutztown, PA. So thank you, Karen, for all your work.
That's very nice of you. Thanks.
Yeah, just telling the truth. That's all I try to do. So I want to get into a little bit of this, this Obama's Clean Power Plan, and Pennsylanians Against Fracking put out a position statement, basically coming out against this Clean Power Plan, right? And I want you to kind of walk us through a little bit about what's the issue here, because you hear Clean Power Plan, and you've got especially Democrats all kind of like cheering in the streets, yay, clean power, we're going to end global warming because Obama said so, and that kind of stuff. But I want to read just a little clip out of that statement, and then I want you to kind of give us a little background here and make that case for why this, Clean Power Plan is not enough. And this is from that statement called, the statement is entitled "Dirty Gas Has No Place in a Clean Power Plan." And we'll put this in the show notes too as well, so people can check out the whole thing for themselves. But this is what it says, quote, "Some may view the Clean Power Plan," this is Obama's Clean Power Plan, "as a small step forward. But small steps are not helpful when you are on the edge of a cliff, and it's the leap that will save you. Make no mistake, we are collectively at the precipice. Unfortunately, its lack of sufficiently aggressive measures is not the only problem with the Clean Power Plan. In fact, the Clean Power Plan may well do far more harm than good. It may ensure that we will be unable to avert warming the planet beyond the 2 degrees Celsius climate scientists have been telling us for several years is the point of no return." All right, this is pretty grim stuff here, Karen. I mean, this is a pretty bold statement saying that, Obama trying to give us clean energy is actually might just push us over the edge. So make that case for us. Why is this a problem?
Sure, and I will say too that I was in Paris for the climate talks, and the discussion there was all around lowering that 2-degree target to 1.5 degrees. So this is an even more urgent issue. And that's one of the big problems. And that's what you referred to in that quote that you read about the step being insufficient when it's the leap that's required. The first problem with the Clean Power Plan is just not enough. It's not nearly aggressive enough. We only have a handful of years left to deal with climate change. And so it's important to understand methane's role in all of that, because natural gas's main ingredient is methane. And, it was something that was really not well understood in the scientific community. Academics were writing about it for some time, but the EPA was very, very slow to pick up on exactly how bad methane was, especially as it relates to oil and gas drilling. And so at first, they didn't even include methane in their greenhouse gas inventory at oil and gas drilling operations because they thought that it was negligible, that the leakage rate would be negligible. The fact that natural gas is cleaner burning is on the consumption side of things, but on the production side, there are leaks throughout the process, and a leak that exceeds 3% of what's coming out of a well, if 3% of it is allowed to leak, all of the cleaner burning benefits of methane are canceled. And so we're finding methane leakage rates of 6 to 12% at well pads. And throughout the process, again, pipelines, compressor stations, natural gas power plants, LNG facilities where they liquefy gas. In some cases, it's deliberately vented off. So we're contributing in a big way to a climate problem that is incredibly urgent for us to deal with. And so this clean power plan sounds like it's this great solution. But if you actually read through what the clean power plan is all about, it's not quite as clean as it sounds. And so our statement is the first of several we're going to be putting out, actually. But this first one is sort of an overview of some of the issues, and it doesn't even touch on one that I would like to bring up. That will be part of a future statement. But the problem with the Clean Power Plan is that it's basically, at its heart, something that's trying to deal with coal. And so it's trying to get us to convert from coal-fired power plants to something else. In a state like Pennsylvania, where we've gone all in on fracking, the something else is natural gas.
Right.
I've already compiled a list myself of 46 clean power or natural gas power plants that they would want to be not part of the Clean Power Plan, and I'll get to that in a second. But they're proposing all of these natural gas power plants to replace coal. And so right there you have this over-reliance on natural gas at this critical time where we really can't contribute more methane into the atmosphere, again, because it's already contributing in a bigger way than anybody ever realized, and it's a very powerful greenhouse gas, 84 times as powerful as carbon dioxide is in that short window of time we have left to deal with climate change. And so not the time to be relying more on methane. So it's now the centerpiece of our solution in a state like Pennsylvania. Every state might handle it differently, but each state is required to come up with its own plan for how it's going to address meeting its targets. In Pennsylvania, that's going to be natural gas. And so the problem is that it's going to create this over-reliance on something we shouldn't be relying on at a time when we should be getting off of all fossil fuels, which is what every reputable climate scientist is telling us to do, leave it in the ground, leave 80% of it in the ground. And so, it's a bad plan in that way. But the specific thing that makes it very, very dangerous, and this is the loophole that's not in our initial statement, that because it's so big it has to be a statement unto itself, is that there's a loophole in the Clean Power Plan that says that natural gas power plants that are built after 2014 do not have to be subject to the plan. And so all these old...
Wait. Wait a minute. So if the plant is built after 2014, what everything goes? I mean, it's not subject to what the plan is requiring. I mean, what is even? I mean, even at the political level, what the hell is the logic of that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a crazy loophole. It's in there. There has been a lot of pushback to close it and to require all plants to be under the Clean Power Plan, but it's not written that way right now. And Pennsylvania is very likely to build all those 46 I found in looking through media reports and industry reports of different proposals that are out there. And not one of them would be subject to the Clean Power Plan. So all the older ones that would be are nearing the end of their lifespans. So that's the idea, to put them under these caps that are already inadequate by my calculations. But
I mean, I hear this, and this is what immediately comes to my mind. What immediately comes to my mind is this is the big give back to big gas and oil. Basically what this is saying that we're going to put all in, we're going all in on natural gas development, and we want to make sure that Pennsylvania is going to be right up front with this massive development of fracking sites and kind of compressor stations and all this, so that we're not going to... Hey, businesses, big corporations, global, kind of frackers, come on right in. We're going to exempt you from this Clean Power Plan so that you'll build this in exchange for short-term jobs. I mean, and short-term, that's best I can think of. Short-term jobs, maybe a little revenue for the state, but, we can't even get an extraction tax on these folks. And then we see what's already happened in North Dakota, where we're just shutting all this stuff down, right? Because, things are drying up or they're causing all sorts of problems. I mean, is that your take on it? That this is nothing but a big giveaway back to the kind of big oil and gas?
Well, this is part of the federal plan, so it's not something that Pennsylvania engineered. It's something they'll take advantage of, but it's part of the federal plan. And
wait. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. So this is blowing my mind. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
So the federal plan exempts. Right. This is not the Pennsylvania one, but this is the federal plan.
The federal plan includes this loophole that Pennsylvania, a state like Pennsylvania, can take advantage of. So it's not something that was engineered here. It's something that they'll use to their benefit because they, again, have gone all in on natural gas. They've done nothing but enable this industry. And so it will behoove this administration to take advantage of that. And the Republican legislature, you can't leave them out of it. They're the ones who are going to try to block it, So right. If it goes through, it's going to be because it did something good for the industry. And that would be allowing 46 power plants, plus who knows how many more coming, to be built that aren't subject to the plan, that will compete with the plants that are already under the plan. And of course, the plants under the plan that have to be capped, even though, again, I consider the caps to be inadequate, but still they're capped. So any sort of capped old aging power plant will be under competition from these new power plants. They'll go offline early. And so anything that was being capped will just go offline, replaced with something that's not subject to the plan that has a lifespan of 40 years. This planet cannot afford to be relying on natural gas for the next 40 years.
No, and I think that, the Obama administration, and frankly, it's been the Democrats who've really who've gotten behind this. I mean, the Obama administration, a lot of the corporate Democrats, they have, used the language, and it says this in the statement too as well. But we've heard it again and again about this idea about a bridge fuel, right? That this bridge is going to get us, from the point of relying upon fossil fuels into this kind of foreseeable future. And I know this. There's so many problems with that idea of a bridge fuel. Like, number one, that it's already, you're still burning fossil fuels, right? This is not it. And you have, the whole issue of the methane stuff. So let me ask you this. I want to get to that, the whole bridge fuel language in a second, but I want to go back to something you were saying a little bit earlier, and you were talking about you're talking about the methane emissions, right? And from what I've been reading around, both this is the report. I looked at a report from Scientific American, something came out from Think Progress, another thing published in the Texas Tribune, all talking about a range of studies, 10, 11, 12 studies, depending which one you're reading, what they're bringing in. And they're saying that, the EPA, federal EPA, has set a kind of a level about what levels of methane can be emitted before it becomes a major problem. And they're already finding like 1.5 times, right? That rate is already being emitted. So, but a lot of them keep on pointing to, and they seem to make an extra, a special point of pointing to the fact that a lot of this is kind of human error. Right. So, it's because, somebody forgot to put the cap on, or somebody did this, or somebody did that. And like, again, I think if I'm a reader, I'm picking that up and I'm saying, oh, okay, so then what's the solution? Well, the solution is to make sure that humans make fewer errors. I mean, what's your take on that line of argument for there, and what kind of respond to that?
Well, this is going to sound completely from off base, but there's an excellent book from maybe 20 years ago now called The Psychology of Everyday Things. It was retitled The Design of Everyday Things because the title itself was a design flaw. They were putting it in the wrong part of the bookstore. But awesome. The whole idea was, the author was talking about all these, weird design problems that we have. And he made the point in the book that so often it's, operator error when they pull the wrong tab because it's identical to the one that should have been designed to look different. When they pull the wrong lever at the natural gas or the, nuclear power plant or something, because, the design flaw was built in. It was too easy to grab the wrong thing. So it's always operator error. When the plane goes down, it's operator error. It's the pilot's problem. But the fact is, these things are designed badly. And so that's the problem, with all of these kinds of technologies that we are using these days, the money is to be made on the front end. The money is never to be made on the back end. In fact, the back end is about cleaning up your mess. And that's not where the profit is. That's where you lose money. And so these companies do absolutely as little as they need to comply with whatever laws and regulations are ever enforced, which are rare. But, they're not really trying that hard to do it right. They're trying to make the most money. That's where government fails us all the time. I mean, it's up to us to decide whether we should be doing this at all. But even when we're doing it, we're not doing it as well as we could be doing it because the government's giving them a huge pass. And so a lot of these things are not operator errors. They're not human errors. A lot of these things are, design flaws where there are inherent problems in the system that allow methane to leak, that allow wells to deteriorate over time. There's no mechanism in place to really deal with all of that. In my view, the single biggest deal breaker about fracking in Pennsylvania is a huge legacy issue of orphaned and abandoned wells that we have sitting across the state, hundreds of thousands of them that aren't capped. And a Princeton researcher came out and did a study that came out at the beginning of last year where she called some of them super emitters of methane. And so the DEP that's supposed to be in control of capping them hasn't been able to keep up. They don't even know where most of them are. So now we're adding every Marcellus and Utica well to a legacy of wells that need to be maintained every 25 years, and we haven't even gotten a handle on it once. And so, it's nice to say operator error because, there's occasionally a screw up somewhere and something goes wrong, but that's not the real issue. The issue is that their problems are inherent to the way this is done. You can't avoid them, and over time, we're going to have this massive legacy that the taxpayer is going to have to pay for to maintain all of these wells.
Well, and I look at, I even look at, something as blatant as what we see with oil drilling, right? I mean, you see all the oil spills that, and it's not just the big ones that we see like in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's the pipelines that corrode and burst, right? And we're talking about a regulatory environment which is virtually non-existent, like for this industry across the country. And we're talking about a political climate in which, any kind of regulation is considered toxic, right? To the point by every Republican, sure, but by a good chunk of those Democrats, to the business friendly Democrats, right? And this goes right back to something from Thomas Frank's book, Listen Liberal, where, he's been talking about that shift in the Democratic Party towards this kind of technocratic, white collar kind of professional class mindset and away from kind of, working class and kind of mass movements. And it's the same kind of thing. And that's also what concerns me about some of that language I'm seeing about this operator error stuff, because, then I could immediately see, well, what's the response to that? The response comes back as like, well, then we need to put in these kind of new regulations. We need to do what they do in the medical industry. At one time, there was all sorts of these errors, and then they had checklists, right? And they took that from the airline industry and they put in these checklists. So all we really need to do is these checklists. We need better machines. We blah 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 blah, and down the road. But we even know in this political environment that's virtually impossible. Not to mention all the stuff you said built into the design itself, right? There's these flaws that are already going to be fitting this. Not to mention not just the machinery, but the processes.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the 6%, I think, is the statistic. 6% of wells fail right out of the box. And those are the kinds of ones that can be attributed in some cases to operator error because they didn't let the cement dry before they started operating the well. And so all sorts of cracks formed that allow methane to escape. But the way wells are built is there's layers of casing, and they're telescoping. So they go deeper and deeper the farther you get into the center. But the outer casing layer is always going to be laying against a wall of earth. And like the interior ones that are up against another layer of casing. So they pour cement in between all those layers, but that last layer, because it's against a jagged earth wall, is never going to be the kind of seal that you can get farther in. And so one of the big problems with methane migration is that it leaks out the side of the well. That has nothing to do with operator error. That is an inherent design flaw that you'd like to be able to blame operators for because it gives that false sense of being able to do something better. But unfortunately, it's just a fact of how these things are constructed. There's no way around that.
Well, they should just put their thumb in the dike, right? I mean, just like like the nursery rhyme, right? It is operator error, Karen. There's no thumb in the dike there. So, okay, so let me ask you kind of a little bit of a broader question now, and I want to get into a little bit of this statement that came out from John Quigley, and kind of put this in a little bit of a context, because I in the bigger picture, right, there seems to be a kind of either or choice here, right, about what we do. And and I can't help hear the echoes of Naomi Klein's, her book, This Changes Everything, just kind of shouting for me from behind me, is saying like, look, we're out of time. right? And then it's exactly what it's being argued in this statement from Pennsylvanians Against Fracking is like, we got to make the leap now. And the only thing that's standing in the way of that leap is like, we could talk about it as money and influence, but really it's about will, right? I mean, really it's about politicians being unwilling to kind of drop the hammer on this and say, no, we just got to do this. So in that context, I mean, for a little background for people who may not be familiar with the whole thing. So John Quigley, he was the former Secretary of Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania. He just lost his job, quote unquote, resigned, but we all know what that means. Back on May 23rd, I think, or 22nd. And one of the reasons that was being offered that why he was being asked to leave or why he was resigning was this email that came out. And it seems to kind of get right to this question about he seems pretty pissed off, number one, pissed off at some of the environmental groups in Pennsylvania and kind of a little bit more broadly. But we're kind of in that question about, do we need to just stop, right, and put this moratorium and this ban on fracking, or should we do this kind of, step by step that we see in the Clean Power Plan? And so for folks, this is the email that John Quigley kind of wrote that NPR State Impact got a hold of and published. And there's some language here for all those little kids listening to my little podcast. But just since I'm going to read it in entirety because I want Karen to kind of walk us through, a little bit of some of the background of this, but also what's going on with this guy. So he was pissed off, and this was back from April 13th is when the email was sent. And it says, "I've slept on this, but can no longer hold back. Where the fuck were you people yesterday? The House and the Senate hold Russian show trials on vital environmental issues, and there's no pushback at all from the environmental community. Nobody bothering to insert themselves in the news cycle? Is there no penalty for Democratic apostasy, or at least a shaming of the gas-shilling Republicans? Apparently so. Do some of you think that staying on your moratorium hobby horse," this is really what I want to come back to, "the moratorium hobby horse does anything to advance the cause of protecting the environment and public health? Do you really think the governor will veto this shit with no support? The environmental community is without influence in Harrisburg. What will you do about it?" Boom. Like, it's like, he wants to drop the mic after this, apparently, right? So Quigley, I mean, he's going after a bunch of environmental organizations. Was Burkes Gas Truth one of those organizations?
Oh, no. No, not at all.
Not at all. Just checking, just so full disclosure.
In full disclosure.
So Quigley is sending this out. So two questions, I guess. Like, one, why do you think he was sending this out? And then two, let's get at this moratorium hobby horse stuff and what's going on there. So number one, just go to number one. Why is he sending this thing out?
Right. So it's a long and frustrating process that he's reacting to, which, if I can give him any credit for anything, it's the ultimate frustration he must have been feeling over the fact that the very controversial law, Act 13, that was in some portions of it at least were discarded by the Supreme Court for being unconstitutional. That was the rewriting of the state's oil and gas laws a few years ago. Mm-hmm. That law, the part of it that remained, mandated a rewriting of the regulations that accompany it. And that's Chapter 78. So these Chapter 78 rules have been under revision for a very long time by the DEP. They came up with a draft plan. Lots of organizations, including mine, were commenting on different portions of the revisions. All of a sudden, when they started having public hearings around the state, conventional drillers started showing up in droves to say, we don't like these rules. We don't want to be subject to the same rules. We're mom and pop companies that can't compete with the big companies to do paperwork in the same rate and blah, blah, blah. So we want our own rules. And the legislature, the Republican-led legislature, immediately put through a bill that said, DEP, you need to go back and separate out two sets of rules, one for conventional and one for unconventional. So they'd already been through this process for a very long time, writing the regulations in the first place. Now they have to go back and revise it all, separate them out. They did that. Then they had to go through another public comment period. We commented again. And so it was a very, very long, protracted process. And it still appears that the Republican-led legislature supporting the conventional drillers, or drillers in in general just want to get in the way of these regulations going into place. And that's the Russian show trial that Quigley was referring to. And he expected to see more support from the environmental community. But some time ago, full disclosure, I've been one of the many organizations represented at meetings where we sit down with Scott Perry, who's the head of the oil and gas division at DEP, and various staffers, depending on the subject of the meeting. Sure. And so, we've been meeting with him for a long time. We were very, very involved in the writing of those, comments on the regulations and the revisions that were proposed. And frankly, our comments, and I'm not talking about my comments, I'm talking about expert comments that were commissioned by people who really know what they're talking about, who wrote comments that were 400 plus pages long. Those comments were ignored by the DEP. They did very little to listen to anything that we were telling them to do, especially with respect to like orphan and abandoned wells, how to really get on top of that and to use the industry to help them do it. They ignored all of it. And so all of a sudden, when they're not getting their way with the legislature, now we're their best friends. Now they're coming back and, won't you back us up? And won't you put out a letter and have one of your rallies? And so I personally said, no, thank you, because I think we wrote some really good comments that were ignored first time out. Maybe if we had a better set of regulations to be defending, I might help, but not in this situation where they've just ignored us, as they always do. And so a lot of the environmental organizations did not feel similarly, and so they decided to get involved in doing things to support them. So I was actually kind of surprised that Quigley didn't feel that he had enough support. They were bending over backwards to help him get these things through. And so when he sent the email, it's not clear who all he sent it to, but he surely was sending it to his most favorite environmental groups, like Penn Future, where he used to work. It appears, based on some ads that came out after the email went out from Penn Future, Penn Environment, and Clean Air Council, that they may well have been recipients of the email, and they may have put out some ads criticizing Democrats who were jumping ship, so to speak, to support him in his request that they do something. That's speculation still. They're not been confirmed, but we certainly didn't get the email. Certainly seems like some of his more favorite groups. And so it was especially obnoxious when he brought up the moratorium Hobbyhorse that you mentioned, because they weren't calling for a moratorium, not the people he was writing to. But it was clearly something that was in his head because of all of us who have been in Harrisburg for a very long time calling for a moratorium.
So, I mean, this just screams to me of the same kind of process. We've seen from a lot of these kind of new Democrats, going way back to Clinton, to do the whole kind of counter scheduling stuff, right? Where you'd basically, with one hand, that you'd kind of rely upon your base to kind of show up to try to get through particular proposals that you were a hobbyhorse, but then you turn around and the next, like in your next breath, and you attack those very organizations to demonstrate that you're separate and you're not kind of like beholden to them. I mean, that seems to be, this same, kind of process here. So he wants to kind of go after this moratorium Hobbyhorse. And what, in many ways, that really kind of belittles, in my mind, that whole idea about the moratorium. And, do you think that you're someone who's been involved in the process. You're not sitting there as you're not like, some sort of armchair activist that is just shouting from a soapbox about, this is the way that the perfect world should look, right? And then anything less than that perfect world, you're folding your arms and you're going home, right? I mean, as you said, you've been involved in the process. You've been commenting on this. And just as you said, and just Karen, if you didn't get this from what Karen was saying, when you're commenting on a bill, it's not just simply, like you're commenting on a Facebook post, right? You're actually kind of trying to contribute to the process of lawmaking, right? So it's an official part of that, the lawmaking process. So you're not that kind of that armchair person. So is there a place for that kind of, those small steps? Or, right, do we really need to just bite the bullet now and take that leap and move forward?
Right. It's absolutely necessary that we bite the bullet, take the leap forward. The only reason why I've ever worked on regulations is because people are being hurt right now and they need protection right now. But the other reason why I've worked on regulations is because there are certain things like the orphan and abandoned wells issue that are legacy problems that will need to be regulated. If we banned fracking 2 hours from now, it would not change the requirement for us to deal with what's been left behind. And so some things do need to be regulated. And so to ignore basically everything that, we were asking them to do in a substantive way to really catch up with this problem and be on top of it for, in a way that we've never been on top of it, frankly. It requires not just regulations, but regulations that will actually be enforced. And we didn't get even close to that with the Chapter 78 revision. So, so it's time to get off of methane. It's time to be less disparaging of people who are calling for a moratorium and ultimately a ban on fracking, because that's actually exactly what has to be done in the name of the environment and public health. This is a head of an agency talking, who was the head of an agency that was very, very criticized by Eugene D. Pasquale, the Auditor General, in a report he wrote, still during the Corbett administration, but it's what they inherited at DEP, an agency that was referred to by the Auditor General as being woefully unprepared to deal with the shale gas boom. It's also, with respect to public health, something else he cites, a state government that has a Department of Health that was actually handing out a buzzwords list to staffers with words like fracking, hair falling out, skin rash, Marcellus, water contamination, saying that when people call up registering health complaints using those terms, disengage with them. And so they were making an active attempt to not gather public health information. And so when that's the state that you live in, and the reality of fracking is as bad as the science confirms that it is, and experience everywhere confirms that it is, it's time to get off of this stuff. It's not time to try to, nibble around the edges and do it a little bit better.
Yeah, just what I tell my kids all the time. Sometimes the best way to get that Band-Aid off is just to rip it off.
Rip it off.
Right. Well, I think that we should all take heed to some of the stuff that Karen said here too as well. And this is really the nitty-gritty of activism, folks. And this is what it means to be in social movements, and not just kind of looking at it from the sidelines, or kind of having your nose in just some book someplace about what is the kind of the pure future. Because frankly, social movements, political activism is about getting your hands dirty, right? It's not about a space of ideological purity. And what I love about the work that Karen does is exactly this, is like, look, you recognize there's people getting hurt right now. So you've got to fight the fight that is right now, right? At the same time, you got to make this, it's about getting off this. These are not two things in opposition to one another. It's not this kind of like you fight for this reform at the expense of that future, or you fight for the future at the expense of the reform. It's the both and approach. And any social movement that's worth its weight, that's accomplished anything throughout the history of this country, around the world, has done that. So, I hear the echoes, a lot of what's going on right now in the political world, especially in the Democratic campaigns, right? You've got the same kind of stuff that's taking place, right? In the Democratic Party, you've got the same things that happens in social movements all the time. But hear this, folks, right? It's about getting your hands dirty, and it's about kind of getting in there and fighting the fight, but slogging it out in the day-to-day, but basically calling that wake-up call for everyone that's out there. So when we're going to coming up to a break right now, and we come back after the break, we're going to talk about one of those things that we can do, right? One of those things that we can do in the immediate head up, and we're going to be talking about the March for the Clean Energy Revolution coming up in Philadelphia. And I know I'm going to be there. I know Karen's going to be there. We want you to be there too as well. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back and we'll talk about that. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor of Raging Chicken Press, and we're here in the sit down. Be right back. Welcome back to Raging Chicken Radio's The Sit Down. I'm here once again with Karen Feridun of Berks Gas Truth. And in the first half, we were talking about, the clean power plan for the Obama, from the Obama administration, and just, the Swiss cheese nature of it, and how this is basically is not going to do much at all, right? If not make it worse when it comes to trying to protect our planet. But speaking of protecting our planet, right, and ways that we kind of get out there and mobilize and make sure that our voices are heard, so we can keep the momentum going to try to shut down fracking in this state, so we can try to get that moratorium, and we basically, show we're going to invest with our bodies, put our bodies on the wheels of the machine in order to protect our climate future. So this is what I'm doing for it, folks, right there. I'm going to the Clean Energy Revolution March, right, in Philadelphia, and that's going to be July 24th. That's the Sunday before the Democratic National Convention, the day before, the Sunday, the day before the Democratic National Convention kicks off, and we're expecting thousands and thousands of people to head to Philadelphia to say, This stops now. So, Karen, I know Berks Gas Truth is, part of the coalition that is supporting this march. Give us a little background on kind of like, how did we get to this point? We're saying, let's get this march together and let's set it right before the Democratic National Convention.
Well, a couple of years ago, we started a coalition in Pennsylvania called Pennsylvanians Against Fracking. Up in New York State, where they have a ban on fracking, one of the major players there was New Yorkers Against Fracking, and we thought it was, long overdue that Pennsylvania should have a coalition of organizations, businesses, and institutions that came together in the same way to say enough is enough. You were talking earlier about getting your hands dirty and being involved in the writing of regulations and commenting and all that sort of thing. But, you have to be able to do that. But you also have to be able to speak with a voice that calls for the right thing, that drives the narrative, that gets the press talking about where we should be, not where we have been, and those sort of incremental steps to try to make it better, which never ever do. So we needed a statewide coalition. We put it together. Our first big event was when we protested Governor Wolf's inauguration. And since then, we've met with him. We've met with various people from his staff. So, we're at the point now where we, as Pennsylvanians Against Fracking, feel an even more urgent need to be pressing on the Wolf administration. No sitting governor in the state, by the way, has ever gone to visit Dimock or any of the other impacted communities in this state. They have not seen it firsthand. And so at the very least, we want him to do things like that. I'm also part of a national coalition called Americans Against Fracking. And so when we found out that the Democratic Party was bringing their convention to the land that sanity forgot.
I love it.
I mean, not just
Keystone to what?
Not just Pennsylvania, where we're being fracked to smithereens, but Philadelphia, the city that they're referring to as the Houston of Pennsylvania because they want to turn it into a gas hub. And, not just gas, oil trains are going through the city. They're just building.
Pipelines. They're trying to kind of reboot a bunch of these outdated refineries down there.
Refinery project, yeah. It's a mess. So, they're bringing their convention to this state, to this place. So it was irresistible to us. We had to do something. And so we decided to have a big march the day before. This is not an electoral thing. A lot of the groups involved are 501c3s that can't go there. But what it is an opportunity to speak to the world, first of all, because everybody's going to be paying attention to Philadelphia, but also to our party leaders in the Democratic Party. We're also planning things to target the Republican National Convention, but the one that we're most involved with, because we're in Pennsylvania, is the one in Philadelphia, where we're going to speak to Obama and to Wolf and to Governor Hickenlooper from Colorado, who actually drank fracking waste to show that it was safe, and to Governor Brown in California, who was in Paris talking up, all the great work he's doing on climate, but he's fracking the state to smithereens. He's not getting in the way of that happening in his own state. So, there are a lot of Democratic leaders who are failing us in a big way. And so we're there to speak to all of them.
No, and I think this is a great opportunity too as well. And again, this is not about, say, like the partisan, we're pro-Democrat. The idea here is, right, at the very least, right, the Democratic Party gives lip service to climate justice, right, and preventing climate change, right. Whereas the Republican Party are off the rails on this shit, right? So so again, it comes about political expediency, right? Is that we look like we're in a scenario where we've got it looks like there's going to be a merge. Hillary Clinton's going to come out with a fairly strong likelihood, right? Well, let's assume this for a second. Let's assume that, this email stuff doesn't kind of go crazy and that goes off the rails. But let's assume that Hillary Clinton gets the nod, and Hillary Clinton has got a long history of coziness with the oil and gas industry. But it's in the Democratic Party where the party has given lip service to this stuff. And we know that the Bernie Sanders people are going to be, they got a lot of their people. Bill McKibben is there on, on the platform committee, and that it's about pushing that party basically to make good on its words. So that, it makes a whole lot of sense. Is like, if I'm looking at this, not from a party perspective at all, but I'm looking at this from, trying to kind of defend the planet, or, a range of other issues too as well. I'm going to say, who are the people I've got to push? And I think this is again, what a lot of the Democratic establishment, it happens on the Republican side too as well. They don't like when their own people push them, right? What they perceive as their own people, because they think that, hey, environmentalists should be in our camp, or labor folks should be in our camp. Why are they criticizing us? Well, it's precisely because because you claim to be representing us. And so we're going to basically put some teeth behind that.
That's right. I mean, Berks Gas Truth was actually the group that coordinated a statewide effort that succeeded in getting the Pennsylvania State Democratic Committee in 2013 to vote in favor of a statewide moratorium on fracking. The party leaders hated it.
Yep.
I mean, this state is still under the control of Ed Rendell and many significant absolutely pro-fracking. And so we have that to deal with in Pennsylvania. I mean, so many people in the Wolf administration, including Wolf himself, were part of his cabinet, and they've all sort of just switched seats, you know. And so the mentality is still there that it's all pro-fracking. They were critical of Governor Cuomo for banning it. And so, you know, so that's what we're dealing with here, but we're also dealing with the Obama administration that is responsible for something that sounds good and really isn't, like the Clean Power Plan, and then something that's really horrible like TPP, where, you know, the investor section of TPP will undo every attempt. I don't care what he wants to say about the Clean Power Plan. You know, we're already being sued over the rejection of Keystone XL and because of the similar agreement that was in NAFTA. You know, so these trade agreements that have this investor section that includes this arbitration system where they can take their cases in front of a tribunal that is entirely gamed in favor of the industry because the members of the tribunal are from the industry. You know, when that's the process for settling these disagreements, then all the investors win. The, you know, governments that are sued lose. And that's the thing that they're negotiating that will, you know, that they're talking about at the very same time that Obama is actually in Stanford a couple of years ago giving his historic climate talk. I mean, it's just so cynical. So, you know, that's the Democratic Party that we're actually dealing with. They have a nice, you know, facade, but what's happening is really actually pretty awful.
That's an awesome point. And it's like exactly the issue. This is the actual Democratic Party that we're dealing with, right? Because remember, the TPP is Obama's baby, right? I mean, this is Obama's NAFTA, right? That he's, you know, wanting to kind of, you know, pair up the Reagan and Clinton legacy all in one in the giant TPP trade deal. And what's interesting, what I think is really important about what you brought up, and this is what again, activists need to kind of pay attention to this stuff. And if you don't know what the TPP is, you know, it's time to start reading on this stuff. Because it's not simply just, you know, not only do you have exactly what you said about the trading services, about, you know, what we see that's built into these tribunals, is that not only does, you know, history tell us that it's going to suppress, right, American jobs even further. Right. It's going to make it's going to ship our jobs overseas, which is going to make conditions elsewhere in the world worse. Right. It's going to rapid industrialization, very often coal reliant. Right. We must say rapid industrialization elsewhere, suppressing jobs here at home, redistribution of the wealth upwards. Right. And at the same time, removing the ability for us to regulate our own environment. So basically giving kind of giant global corporations a twofer by saying that you're going to get to pay the lowest wages to anywhere on the planet. At the same time, you can ravish the planet as much as you want, right? And if we try to stop you, well, guess what? We're going to sign on to allow you to sue us in secret courts.
That's right.
This is crazy.
It's not just that, but this particular agreement also includes a fast tracking of LNG, which is liquefied natural gas exports to member nations. And some of the member nations have been dying to get our natural gas, including Japan. There's an already approved LNG facility, the first one on the East Coast in Cove Point, Maryland. The two big customers for that, they've already sold off their capacity, are India and Japan. And so they are just eager to get our natural gas. And so now fast tracking would be built into TPP. We can't allow that to happen. It's game over for the climate when you let stuff like that happen. And the other thing you just mentioned, coal again, just quickly, is that the Clean Power Plan that's all about coal actually doesn't stop coal production. It stops coal consumption. It's about about coal-fired power plants. It's not about mining for coal. And so we're not going to see an end to mining for coal in Pennsylvania. We'll just export the coal.
This is absolutely crazy. Well, all the more reason to get out there in the streets on July 24th.
That's right.
Once again, here it is, folks. Here it is, right there. I am joining the clean energy revolution, right? The march is on July 24th, right down in Philadelphia, and you can text revolution to, what is it now?
69866.
All right, and we'll have that information up in the show notes here on the podcast. And just a way to close it out is, thank you, Karen, so much for joining us today. And folks, really, this is just a real deal. And I think that if you put together some of the things that she said, I mean, I just want to highlight this as, when I look at the best activism out there, the kind of thing that we hope to highlight on this podcast, right, is that, number one is that, there's three tenets I always think about, kind of really like sustainable, long-term, long-haul activism, is that it's about the daily slog work that you put in, right? It's about creating and maintaining and dominating the narrative, right? And it's about mobilization. Right, you get those three things together: the daily work, right, controlling the narrative and the story, and then the mobilization, and that's that's all about kind of winning our future. So, Karen, man, thank you so much for all the work that you do and all the work you do over at Berks Gas Truth as well. And we hope to have you back on too as well, because we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. And we just got this range resources thing we didn't even get to today, where it looks like once again we've got the Pennsylvania legislator or government, right? Our good old Wolf and his folks are basically giving away the farm to big oil and gas. But we're going to get into that another time.
Great.
So Karen, we'll talk to you before the march, but I want everybody to get out there. And if somebody wants to kind of find out how they can get there, how do they find out?
Yes. You just showed it on that sign, and I know you're going to put it on your site, but it's cleanenergymarch.org. You go there, click on the travel page, and you'll see a whole bunch of buses, including one that leaves from Kutztown, and we have a stop in Trexlertown as well. And so if you want to get on the bus, sign up. We'll make a seat for you. We'll get an extra bus if we need to. We're going to get everybody down to Philadelphia. We need to see everybody there because we need to speak with the loudest, clearest voice possible. And that takes big numbers. So please help us make that statement in Philadelphia on July 24th.
All right, we're going to be there, and Raging Chicken Press will be there too, on the ground in Philadelphia for the huge Clean Energy Revolution March, as well as the Democratic National Convention, to cover not the inside of the convention, but what's happening outside the convention, where the people are. All right, this has been The Sit Down. This is a project of Raging Chicken Press, and I'm Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. We'll see you real soon again, folks, and don't forget on Tuesdays, tune in for Out the Coop. That is our insider look at the good, bad, and ugly of everything that is Harrisburg, PA. Karen, thanks again. Once again, enjoy the day. It's going to be hot. We got to cool things down. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're out of here. See ya.